You are listening to the VBAC Link podcast, and this is episode number 72. Holy cow, 72 episodes.
But really, it's like 86 or something.
Oh my
we
gosh.
have special episodes,
That's
right?
amazing. I
We're
love
going
it.
to do something fun for
it.
our 100th episode. It's going
Oh.
to be like in December sometime.
It's coming.
We're going to make a plan.
All right, you guys.
Yeah.
Special, or episode 100 is going to be special, but today we have special, or not a special episode.
It's just regular.
We have episode 72.
But it's special.
And this one is special. I want to introduce you guys to our friend Kimberly. She is beyond amazing. I could just rant and rave about her for days. She was actually my own client as well, and she had a VBAC after 2 C-sections, and it was a birth center transfer to the hospital after 5 days of labor. Oh my gosh, it was an
amazing.
induction, and wow, she'll just tell you all of it, and about her water being broken. You guys, this story is going to inspire, so do not leave. Just don't leave.
Lock your kids in their rooms.
Yep. Just
Throw
keep
some
listening.
granola bars at them.
Yep, because she's
You're
amazing.
going to be on the edge of your seat.
She's amazing. Her education is amazing, and I know that she's going to empower you. But of course, we have a review of the week, so I want to hurry and turn the time over to Julie before we get into Kimberly's beautiful story.
Well, thank you, Megan. I am so excited for Kimberly's story, too, because I had like a little, I feel like 0.00333% part of this birth. And I'm excited to hear how before and after, how everything unfolded. So the review of this week is from Jamith8917 on Apple Podcasts. And she says, I binged this podcast and even re-listened to several episodes while prepping for my VBAC. I honestly don't think I could have had my successful VBAC if it wasn't for this podcast. Around 38 weeks, an OB at my practice tried to scare me into a repeat cesarean, and it almost worked. I was in such a bad headspace. I reached out to Meagan and Julie on Instagram, and they responded to me. They sent me to the research and to the episodes that helped me conquer my fears. I felt so alone and truly hopeless at this time, and they filled me back up and made me feel stronger than ever. This podcast also introduced me to things like chiropractic care, spinning babies, and gave me the strength to switch to a midwife during my last month of pregnancy. This podcast is changing the lives of so many women. I am forever grateful for finding it. Dude, goosebumps. I just got goosebumps.
Amazing.
I love that. It's reviews like that from people like you listening right now that really help us know that what we're doing is helping women all over the place in the little chunks of their world. And that's what we set out to do. We want to change the VBAC world and the cesarean world, one woman and one birth at a time. And so when we get reviews like this one, it really touches our heart, tugs at our heartstrings, and lets us know that we are doing the right thing by helping you. So if you haven't had a chance yet, will you go find us on Facebook or on Google or on Apple Podcasts and give us a rating and just tell us what this podcast means to you. And it doesn't have to be long and detailed, but we always love the reviews. And who knows, maybe next week we are going to be reading your review.
You are tuned in to the VBAC Link podcast with Julie Francom and Meagan Heaton, VBAC moms, doulas, and educators here to help you get inspired for birth after having a C-section. Together, they have created a robust VBAC preparation course along with this uplifting podcast for women who are preparing for their VBAC. Although these episodes are VBAC specific, they encourage all expectant moms to listen and educate themselves on how to avoid a cesarean from the get-go. The purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. It is not meant to replace advice from any other qualified medical professional. Here are your hosts, Julie and Meagan.
All right, women of strength. I just seriously cannot wait for Kimberly to tell you in her own words, because I obviously lived it through myself, and Julie was like,
I lived
she
it
said
vicariously through text message.
Yes, she did. And you were there for a minute. So Kimberly, let's turn the time over to you and let's hear this amazing story of yours, because girl, you are amazing.
Thank you, and I'm so excited to share my stories. And I think that review was perfect because chiropractic care and switching providers in my last month of pregnancy definitely affected my...
Dude, I'm so on it today.
Like, I got tingles while you were reading it. It was amazing. But where all VBAC stories begin is with a C-section. So with my first of all, my mom had 8 children, all vaginally. All of them, she had one epidural with her 5th baby because they were like, oh, this is going to be your last baby. You should have the best experience. She got an epidural and she hated it. She said
so she had to have some more.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where I was coming from, is birth's going to be so easy. Like, we took a childbirthing class in the hospital, and it was actually taught by a nurse doula. And I was like, oh, that's as much natural as I need. She's a doula. She was pretty awesome. That's it. And we were, newly married. We'd only been married for 3 months when I got pregnant. And
wow.
Then we moved to Kansas when I was about 20 weeks pregnant. So I actually never took the gestational diabetes test that pregnancy. I thought I had, because I thought the test was just they draw your blood and they tell you if you have diabetes or not. I didn't know you actually had to drink a drink and stuff. So in Kansas, when they asked me, oh, do you have, you do the test? I was like, yeah, I think so. Like, they drew my blood, so that should be it. Which later I think led to me being having diabetes with, undiagnosed. But so with my first, I didn't like my provider too much, but I felt bad switching. And I thought, like, oh, I don't want to be picky, it's just an OB, it's going to be fine. And then I felt privileged that I got the same OB each appointment, because there were 8 OBs, and they asked me, do you want to meet all the OBs or do you just want to stick with this one? And I was like, oh, I'll just stick with him if I can. And so then I just kept seeing him, which now I know I should have tried to meet, every single provider in the office. And so, because when I went into labor, I got the practitioner that I had never met before. And my mom, another thing, she had all of her babies 2 to 4 weeks early. So when I hit my due date, I was like, what is this?
This is not happening.
Yeah, this is horrible. And then I was swollen. I had to pee every 2 seconds. I felt miserable. And, the OB just told me to stop eating salt, which actually made things worse. And when you have diabetes, you shouldn't really be, you shouldn't really be restricting salt when you're pregnant unless you're like eating cans of food for every meal. But so I went into labor. Well, my waters ruptured at 41 weeks and 5 days, I think. I was 9 days overdue. 9 days overdue. My waters ruptured at 7 in the morning. And then by 7 p.m., I was still, because it was just a trickle, like a pink trickle. And my husband was like, it's fluid. I shouldn't go to work today. And I was like, no, it's fine. I'm not having contractions. So then by midnight, I was feeling horrible. I just had excruciating pain in my hips. I wasn't feeling any contractions, just pain in my hips. But we were like, let's just go to the hospital and test it out. So we tested it, the amniotic fluid. It was amniotic fluid. So they admitted me because I'd already had ruptured waters for so long. So they're like, well, you don't look like you're in labor, but that's weird. You're supposed to be in labor. So let's just admit you, get you on Pitocin. So at 7 in the morning the next day, so now I'm 10 days overdue, they started giving me Pitocin. And they had it up at 20 for a long time. And my uterus wasn't contracting. It was just a solid, massive pain. And they kept asking me, tell us when you feel a contraction. I told them I just feel pain. They put in the vaginal sensor, and they told me, oh, your uterus is just continuously contracted. That's why you're not feeling contractions. And so they'd lower the Pitocin. I finally started contracting. I got to 4 centimeters, but they were like, well, you're almost 36 hours of your waters being ruptured. Let's turn the Pitocin back on to get you going faster. I stopped dilating. I hit 36 hours, and then they told me, well, it's not an emergency. Your baby's doing fine. You're doing fine, but we don't want it to turn into an emergency. Oh. So we're going to go back and give you a C-section. And lots of crying, We'd been, awake for 36 hours, and we were just like, oh my gosh. And so we went for the C-section, and then that was that one. And I didn't really, I felt really bad afterwards, but I was like, whatever, they had my best interest. So my second pregnancy, we moved back to Utah when I was like 20 weeks pregnant again. So I got a new provider, and this one, he said he was VBAC friendly. His wife had like 6 kids or 7, and she had a C-section with 1 kid and then had VBACs. And, he was like, oh yeah, I've been through it. You're pretty, he kept telling me, you're not a very good candidate because you were failure to progress. And so he kept telling me I had a 20% chance.
20?
Because I was also, because I was Hispanic, and that automatically knocks you
Like
so much.
20,
Oh,
up to
yeah,
20.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's, ugh.
It's insane. And so he was like, yeah, you have a 20% chance. You're not very likely, but we can try. And if you go into labor, we'll try. And so, but I took hypnobirthing. I knew I wanted to labor at home as long as possible and then go into the hospital as late as I could. But then I went to labor again, 9 days overdue. And I was so excited. I woke up at 2 a.m. and I was having these really strong contractions. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've never felt this with my son. This is so exciting. These are real contractions. And I just felt amazing. And so I was doing hypnobirthing to, breathe through the pain and stuff. And I labored at home for about 11 hours. And then the contractions were like 3 to 5 minutes apart. But my husband was like, we should probably go in. And I was like, no, I don't want to go in until I'm feeling my baby come out of me pretty much. And he was making lunch. And all of a sudden, my mom and my husband and I, which we had already taken my son to a friend's house so they could watch him while I was in labor. And so it was just my husband and my mom and me at home. And all three of us at the same time felt distinctly. And I had this super weird monster, crazy, painful contraction. And all three of us felt we need to go to the hospital right now. And so we put the stuffed mushrooms in the fridge and ran to the car and went to the hospital. And my baby's heart rate wasn't doing well, and I was only at 1 centimeter. So I was like, all of that laboring, and I'm at 1 centimeter? Like, what the heck? And so, which for 4 days prior, I went to my doctor's appointment, and her heart rate was 10 beats lower than it was all of pregnancy. Like, the whole pregnancy, she was at 135. And then the doctor, he said she was at 125, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Usually she's 135. He's like, oh, it's normal for the heart rates to reduce. I was like, okay, I guess. And then the next day I had my NST because I was overdue. So then we had an NST, and at that NST, her heart rate was like 110. And I was like, oh, that's weird. They're like, no, or it was like 115 or something. They're like, no, that's normal. And then the next day I thought my waters had broken. So we went to the hospital, and it was like 5 beats lower. And they're like, no, that's normal. And then at the hospital, when we got there, it was like 109. And then by the end of the hour that I was being monitored, it was baselining 100 and dipping below 90s and having, the slow recoveries and stuff. So they did think the placenta might be, aging or whatever, and that she wasn't tolerating labor well. My body wasn't responding well because it was still at 1 centimeter. So they were like, well, it seems like she's in distress. We need to get her out right now. And I felt completely at peace with that because the OB, he said, well, you can try laboring for another hour because I did a face. I was like 30% effaced when I first got to the hospital. An hour later, I was like 70% effaced. So they were like, well, we can
change.
That is good change.
Yeah, it was. Well, I didn't think so at the time. Now I know better that effacement, it takes more work than dilation. But at the time, I was just devastated that I hadn't dilated. And I really just felt like she needed, and he said, we can wait another hour, but I just felt, no, she needs to come out now. So we might as well just do the C-section. So we went back, did the C-section, and that time I felt a lot better about it because I had felt, part of the conversation and involved with my birth because we kept the drape down, or we had a clear drape, so I was able to watch everything, and I talked to him the entire time, and with my first, I felt like everything was happening over by my toes. Like I had no idea what was going on. But then with this one, I was like, wow, they're so close. Like they're right there. And they took the baby out, and it was lovely. And so that one was a much better experience. But, the recovery was still hard. Nothing drastic happened. It's just hard to recover from abdominal surgery.
Yep.
And I was kind of sad that I hadn't gotten my VBAC. And my OB, he said, I was like, so can I VBAC after 2 C-sections? And he said, oh, the hospitals don't allow that. And so the one mom that tried to VBAC at home, or she had to VBAC at home after 2 C-sections, and her uterus ruptured and her baby died and she lost her uterus, so she couldn't have any more kids. So I was like, okay, then we'll just schedule the next C-section. But then for some reason, when I actually got pregnant with my third, I just had this burning desire of like, I know my body can do it. I know I can do it, and I'm going to try for a VBAC. And so I started looking up all these VBAC Facebook groups and Googling all this stuff about VBACs, and that's how I found the VBAC link. And I started messaging them, and Meagan replied to me, and she had like super similar experiences with her babies, like ruptured waters and blah, blah, blah. And so I was super excited. She'd had 2 C-sections that were similar to mine, so I got excited that I could have a VBAC. And my husband was not happy because he had hated the whole waiting and knowing if he was going to go to work or not, knowing when his paternity leave was going to start. And he hated, because he was asleep with my first when they decided that I needed a C-section. And so we woke him up, and it was like, hey, your wife's having a C-section. So he was like devastated, and he was like, what the heck? So then during my 3rd labor, actually, he didn't sleep very much because, yeah, he'd had that experience. And so, but I kept researching, kept talking to Meagan. I took the VBAC Link class twice because my husband works on Saturdays. And so my mom flew in from Texas to take this class with me. Mm-hmm. And then, because I wanted someone to take it with me who would actually be there in labor with me. So my mom came in and took it with me. And then my husband was really struggling with the whole VBAC idea, and his parents and family and friends were just painting this super dark picture for him. Like, one of our best friends here in Utah, her mom had a C-section with her first, and then she had like 4 VBACs, and then she had another C-section with her 5th. Or no, she had 3 VBACs. So with her 5th child, she had another C-section, and she attempted to VBAC after her 2nd C-section, and her uterus ruptured, and she got a hysterectomy. So our friend is over here, and like he's really close to this friend, and so she kept telling him like she's gonna get a hysterectomy, she could die, baby could die, like all this stuff. So he was just really struggling with the idea of a VBAC, and so I was like, okay, you are taking a vacation day from work, and you are taking this VBAC class. And so we took the VBAC class again, this time with him. He thought that, you guys were just cherry picking your studies and that you guys were.
We have 4 pages of studies in that manual.
We do, and they're all accredited studies. They're all accredited studies, so you can go and find them.
He learned, though. This is the beginning of the story.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm just telling you guys so you can see where we're coming
from.
For
sure.
You
guys have come a long way, and I think it's important that you're going over this because not everyone has a partner that is 100% supportive from the beginning. So I'm glad that you're telling this part of your story.
Yep.
I just laugh and joke because I know the end result.
Yep. So women, if you have an unsupportive husband, especially a husband against out-of-hospital births, then keep listening. So my husband, so I told him, look, these are all the studies that they cited. This is where they're getting their information. If you're doubting it, look at the studies yourself. And he kept saying, oh, I don't have time to look at these studies. All I have time for is what the OBs tell us, and the OBs are telling you that you probably won't do this, so why put up with the stress of a TOLAC? And because I was with a midwife group, but because I was a VBAC, I always had to consult with the doctors, with the OBs. And so all the OBs were like, well, if you come into labor 5 centimeters dilated, if you come into the hospital 5 centimeters dilated, then sure, of course we'll let you VBAC. But my husband, I'd never gotten to 5 centimeters. With Pitocin, I'd gotten to 4 centimeters. So my husband was like, no, you can't do that by yourself. Your body can't progress by itself. So it's not going to happen. And so then I switched providers at 20 weeks again to 24 or 28. I can't remember. It was after I'd taken the diabetes test because they made me take it early, or they made me take it at 16 weeks to make sure I didn't have diabetes. Okay, sorry, because with my 2nd baby, I did have gestational diabetes. And my OB really wanted me to schedule a C-section. This is another reason why I had a 20% chance of VBAC because he wanted me to schedule a C-section early. He said he would not induce VBACs at all. And so I had to go into labor on my own. And so, but I fought tooth and nail to let me go to 42 weeks. And the other OB and my diabetes specialist and the hospital, director, and my MFM doctor, they all got together and all had a meeting and discussed whether they should let me go to 42 weeks or not. they all agreed that if I wanted to go to 42 weeks, it would be fine. So they gave me permission to go to 42 weeks, which I think is ridiculous. But yeah, that's how I was able to go overdue with gestational diabetes, because if baby's fine and you are fine, then there's no reason you should be induced or have a C-section early, like before 42 weeks. So with my third, I did not have diabetes. So when I was transferring, they wanted to make sure all the testing came out right. So I was transferring to another group of midwives that were hospital midwives, and I had to consult with the OB. And the midwife told me, oh yeah, if you're 1 centimeter dilated, we can get a Foley bulb in you, and then we can give you Pitocin and get you going and stuff. And I was like, this is exactly what I need. Perfect. I'm going with this group.
We're going to take a quick break for a message from this podcast episode sponsor, Madison Reed. I cannot believe how much technology has evolved our lives. I can literally unlock my iPhone with my face now. It is really sad that other areas of our life haven't quite caught up to that level. For example, coloring your hair. Until now, women have only had 2 options for hair color. They can go to the grocery store, spend $7 on a box color that has all these chemicals and makes your bathroom smell yucky for days, or take 2 to 3 hours or more out of their lives to go spend $80 or more at a hair salon. But now we have a perfect solution for you busy moms. Madison Reed takes hair coloring to the next level. You can do it in the comfort of your own home, knowing that Madison Reed's hair color is unique. It's crafted by master colorists who blend nuances of light and dark, cool and warm shades to create over 45 gorgeous multi-tonal shades. The first thing I noticed was that it was so easy to mix, it was so easy to apply, and it didn't make my bathroom stink. I rinsed it out, and right away I could tell the difference between the Madison Reed hair color that I got in the mail and the box dyes that you buy at the grocery store. Now you can get your perfectly crafted hair color by Madison Reed for less than $25. And guess what? We have a special deal for you, our listeners. You can get 10% off your first color box by going to madison-reed.com/the VBAC That's madison-reed.com/the VBAC and promos automatically applied at checkout.
I was so excited. So we transferred over to these people, and then I had to consult with their OB. So I met with their OB, and he told me, no, we don't give VBACs after 2 C-sections, Pitocin, and we're not going to give you a Foley bulb, because if you don't have a Foley, if you have a Foley without Pitocin, there's no point. It's not going to do anything for you. And so I was like, what? Bait and switch? Like, what the heck? Why did the midwife tell me this? And then you are telling me something different. So I was really upset. And my husband was like, but we love the midwife. This midwife is great. We should just stay with this midwife. And I was like, I know we love this midwife, but she's going to be on call. Like, what if she's not on call when I go into labor and we're not going to get this midwife? And then what if I need Pitocin? I need more than just a supportive midwife. So this is why I decided to transfer at 36 weeks to a birthing center midwife, because they would give me a Foley bulb without Pitocin, and they would try to, get things going. They were like, of course, we hope that you do it naturally, but we will definitely try to give you a Foley bulb. And so transferred to this birthing center, and I did interview a few birthing centers before we found our birthing center, because my husband thought all the other birthing centers were too hippie. He didn't like them. He thought that the midwives trusted natural bodies way too much, and that's not realistic because birth isn't that reliable. And so we found a birthing center that did give IV antibiotics, and they were a lot more, they felt more balanced and not as hippie, I guess. And then I also liked it a lot more because the other birthing centers were dark, and everything was like dark wood and dark brown and stuff. And this other one, it was like light blue walls, beautiful bedspread, like a massive window, and it was just gorgeous. And I was like, okay, I can deliver here. Yeah, in this bright, beautiful place. I feel comfortable. And also, because I really wanted a home birth. I was like, if we're going to go out of hospital, we might as well just do home. But my husband was absolutely against it. He's like, that is disgusting. Horrible things are going to happen. Everyone was like, oh, if something tragic happens, you're going to have PTSD in your own house, blah, blah, blah. And so everyone was super against us having a home birth. Plus, birthing center sounds less hippie and less drastic than a home birth. And so my husband...
I take offense. Just kidding. Give him a hard time for me.
Well, because I'd been reading all these books. I was reading Ina May's Guide to Childbirth and, like, you know, Ancient Maps to Modern Birth and, like, Birthing from Within. So I was perfectly comfortable birthing at home. And which is very different, because with my first, I thought, oh, yeah, I'd do a birthing center if this baby goes well. If he doesn't go well, we're just going to, you know, then we know we'll stick with the hospital, because I'll know that I need a hospital. But if it goes well, then I could probably give a birthing center a chance. And so then after I had a C-section, I was like, no, I would never do it out of hospital, because, you know, my baby could have died. But then I realized, no, my baby was fine. I didn't need that C-section. So my body can probably do it and I'll be just fine. And that was after listening to the podcast. There was one that had a very infuriating woman to me, because she was kind of clueless about birth, but she was kind of forced to change providers, and she just happened to pick a birthing center. And then the whole time she was in labor, she was like begging to go to the hospital, but the midwife was like, no, you're fine, you're not gonna die, it's okay. And she like held her hand throughout the birth. And so I figured, wow, if she can have a vaginal delivery with her midwife holding her hand, I need my midwife to hold my hand, and I need her to believe in me more than I believe in myself. And that's why I decided to go with a birthing center midwife who, like, every birthing center midwife I interviewed was like, oh yeah, there's nothing in your stories. And even the midwives that were the hospital midwives and the OBs, they would every single person said, there's nothing in your stories that sounds like you wouldn't be able to have a vaginal delivery if you tried again, but you've had 2 C-sections, is what the hospital midwives would say.
But there's always
but you've had 2 C-sections.
We don't like butts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no butts
like,
allowed.
Those are big butts.
Yeah. It's
Too
so
big butts.
frustrating. Well, and it's like, I don't need you doubting me while I'm in labor. I don't need that, cloud hanging over me. So that's why I decided to go with a birthing center midwife who, trusted in me with no butts. And so
no butts.
And like in my body. And so, but I kept going to the hospital midwives because I wanted to transfer to the hospital, their hospital, because I in my head, I was like, if I go to the hospital, they're not going to give me Pitocin, so I want to know who's the person giving me the C-section. And so that's why I kept going to this hospital midwife. And so now I am 39 weeks along and one day, and I was volunteering at the temple, like at this place where I fold laundry. And I was and I would fold laundry every week. And so I was folding this laundry, and all of a sudden I was sitting down just folding some socks, like it was really light work. And then I felt like I was going to pass out. Like I felt horrible. I didn't feel like I was going to pass out immediately. I just felt really, really icky, and like this pit was in my stomach, and like something was wrong. And I started having this like panic attack, and I was like, what the heck is going on? And then I got up and I started feeling lightheaded, and I asked them, hey, do you guys have a blood pressure cuff? And because I had some low blood pressure issues, like not issues, but I had felt lightheaded from low blood pressure before, even though this felt different. And so I asked them for a blood pressure cuff. She said, no, just go home. And she said that, and I was like, yep, I need to just go home. And so I changed into my street clothes. I tried to get to my car as fast as I could, trying not to cry. And then I get into the car and I'm like bawling. And I'm like, why am I crying? What is going on? And I call my husband and I'm like, Dan, we need to go to the hospital right now. Something's wrong with the baby. I don't know what's wrong. I was like, just put shoes on the kids. We need to go to the hospital right now. And he was like, whoa, calm down. Maybe you should call your midwives and then see if they can, see what's going on. So I was like, okay. So I called the midwives, scheduled an appointment. 45 minutes later, we packed the kids into the car and head to the OB's office, and they do an NST. And her heartbeat was fairly normal. It was like 5 beats lower than normal, but she was actually unresponsive. So she was declared unresponsive. And so then they had me do a biophysical profile, which means that she wasn't moving. Like they even got a little vibrator thing, vibrated my stomach. They had me eat, drink cold water and stuff. And I ate a protein bar, and and she wasn't having accelerations. She was actually having some decelerations, and I was having like contractions, but it was what I felt was just Braxton Hicks. It didn't feel like real labor. And so they said, oh, that's weird. She's not having accelerations, and that's why they declared her unresponsive. So I had a biophysical profile, which is where they do the ultrasound and measure everything. So they measured my fluids, and they were half of what they used to be. They used to be like 16 to 20, and they were at 9 centimeters. And then they declared my placenta grade 3, which means it had started like calcifying and wasn't flowing as well as it should be into the baby. And there was something else weird. I can't remember what. Like she wasn't having breathing or something. Like her lungs weren't breathing or whatever, but she was moving great. And so I got like a low score for my BPP. And so the midwife came in and told me I shouldn't eat anything and I should get ready for a C-section today, and that I should go to the hospital for another NST. So my husband and I get in the car. She said, and I was like, well, we have to get our kids somewhere. So how soon do you want me at the hospital for the NST? She's like, within the hour. I was like, oh man. So we get in the car, and I was like, how can she have a better NST if I don't eat anything? I hadn't eaten since 7 in the morning. It was like 11:30 at this point.
I know, I was talking to you,
like,
and I was like, eat!
I know, you're like, eat something.
You're like, they don't want me to. I'm like, I don't care. Eat! It's like, how you need energy.
Yes.
And my baby needs energy, too.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, that's what, yeah, she needs it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went home and I ate some carrots and hummus and I drank a Gatorade. Like, I still wanted to keep it light because I had horrible reactions after my second C-section to the medications and stuff. So I wanted to keep it light because I didn't want them to give me the stomach acid stuff again, which is what I reacted badly to. And so I ate carrots and hummus and Gatorade, and then we took the kids over to babysitter, and then just Dan and me went to the hospital. My mom wasn't here yet, and so she wasn't going to come till like 4 days after my due date because I'd always go so far overdue, and she still had 6 kids at home. So she only wanted to be here for like 10 days. And I'm like, well, if you come on my due date, you know, you're going to be here just 10 days and then the baby's going to be born. So she wasn't going to come till later. But I was just 39 weeks at this point. And so we go to the hospital. She has a worrisome deceleration at the beginning of the NST. And then she has perfect, like she has accelerations. She doesn't have deceleration. She had a perfect NST. And so the midwife comes in an hour after they said she was fine. Like, they wanted the midwife to come talk to me to say, okay, it's safe for you to go home. But she didn't come for like an hour and a half. So we were there attached to the machine for like 2.5 hours. I think they were just waiting for one more deceleration or something to be like, oh, yeah, you've had 2 decelerations. You need to have a C-section. But that didn't happen. So the midwife gets there. She's like, you know, everything looks fine. We still recommend that you get a C-section today. And so she was like, you can get a C-section today, or I guess you can go home if you want. And I was like, okay, goodbye.
Go home. Yep. See you later.
So we're going home from the hospital. My birthing center midwife, because I was like, they want me to have a C-section. This is the deal. And she said, that doesn't sound like an immediate C-section to me. There's still a lot we can do. So I was like, and I had, with my previous baby, she had, you know, the placenta crap out. And I was like, I don't want the placenta to crap out, and it's already crapping out at 39 weeks. And so she said, okay, then right now, baby, which she just kept saying, we'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll talk about it tomorrow, because my appointment with her was the next day. So I was like, okay, Dan, we're just going to trust her, and we'll go talk to her tomorrow. We'll give it another day. And I didn't want a C-section on that Monday either, for some reason, because I was calling my mom and everything while we were on our way to the hospital, and she was like, do you need me there right now? I can hop on a plane. And I said, no, you know, just come on tomorrow or come on Wednesday, because I feel like I'm not going to have a C-section till Wednesday. So even if things don't look good, I'm still going to schedule my C-section, like, at least for Wednesday. So I felt, okay, we're just going to wait it out a little bit longer, and we're going to go talk to the birthing center midwife tomorrow. So the next day, and she was like, we can put a Foley catheter in tomorrow, you know, just wait. So the next day was Tuesday. We went and talked to her. She said, you know, we checked the heartbeat. The heartbeat was great. It was back up to 135 and even going as high as, you know, 150, having normal accelerations and stuff. So she said, your baby looks fine. Let's induce you before because that's pretty much what the hospital midwives were waiting for, is just for the placenta to crap out enough to have a C-section. They were like, we'll just wait and see. And so this birthing center midwife was like, well, her heartbeat is strong. Your placenta is strong enough right now. Let's get things going while your baby's healthy and see if she tolerates labor better. And that's what I had been talking to her about. So I was like, great, let's get the Foley in. But she said, no, you get a good night's sleep tonight. And I was going to have another NST. She's like, we'll see what this next NST says, and then you get a good sleep, and then we'll put it in on Wednesday. So I was like, okay, great. We went, had the other NST. It came back perfect. So we went to sleep, and on Wednesday morning got the Foley bulb. And man, it brought back some PTSD. Like, I didn't realize how much PTSD I had until they put the Foley bulb in. And I guess I had trapped all of this trauma in my cervix, and so then when they put the Foley bulb in, it just triggered. Like, I felt like I was back in my second pregnancy, getting ready for the C-section, when I felt like after they gave me the pre-surgery meds, like I was going to pass out and like I was going to die, and I just felt horrible. And so all of that came rushing back. And so I had to like drink water from my little daughter's sippy cup because I couldn't sit up to drink water from my bottle and like all this stuff. But they eventually got the Foley, and my mom, she's a hypnotherapist. And so she did these visualizations of me being on a cloud and stuff. And so I was able to get the Foley in, but they were only able to fill it up. Like, she wanted to put 60 milliliters in, and she only got 35 milliliters in. But it was in, and I was super excited. I'd never had a Foley bulb before. And so she told us to go to the zoo or the aquarium, and just walk around. So we went to the aquarium with our kids and walked around all day. And then we went home, and I was having contractions regularly, like every 10 to 15 minutes, I think, or 15 to 20. It depended. They'd get closer and then they get further. But they definitely felt like labor contractions, and they were getting harder and stuff. And so we went home, and then I had stuff leaking onto my pants, and it was like this pinkish clear fluid. But I was like, I didn't see the pink until later, but I was like, oh, my pants are wet, like slightly wet. So I think the saline solution's leaking. So I told my midwife, I told my doula, I think my Foley bulb popped because it's leaking fluid. And they were like, oh, well, we'll just put a new one tomorrow. And then my mucus plug started coming out of the catheter, and I was like, what the crap?
That was a wild picture. I've never seen it. I mean, I knew that was mucus, but like I've never seen it coming out of the catheter like that.
I know. That is so weird.
It was cool.
I need to see this picture.
I'll show you.
Yeah. So I had my mucus plug coming out of, which it felt like I had a penis. Like, it was the weirdest thing having a Foley in and just walking around. I was like, what in the heck?
It felt like I had a penis. Whoa, that's so cool.
It was the weirdest thing. And so even my son was like, do you not have a penis anymore? No, they took it out. But because my son was here he was 3.5 years old, so he was there the whole time that I was being induced, and at home at least. And so I don't keep anything from him. I was like, yep. And I had to like wrap gauze around the tube and stuff because it was leaking. And he's like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, it catches the stuff that's coming out. And so he's like, oh, you need to catch the stuff. Anyways. And so mucus plug was coming out, and I was like, whoa, is this thing letting stuff out of my body? And she was like, yeah, it's a catheter. It let stuff, fluids pass through it. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I noticed that there was pink on my pants because I was wearing white, garments underneath. And so my garments were pink. And I was like, oh my gosh, this could be fluids, I guess. And so, but I kind of was in denial because they also say, pink stuff starts coming out when your cervix is dilating and stuff. So I was like, oh, the pink stuff just means I'm getting cervical change. And so, but we go into the midwife the next day, but then the mucus plug started coming out, and I was like, whoa, this is exciting. But we go to the midwife the next day, and she tests my fluids, and she's like, yep, husband was right, because my husband, he's always like, that looks like amniotic fluid, and I'm always like, no, it's not. And so she was like, it is amniotic fluid. You should have come in last night, but, it's okay. You can just go home and keep laboring. So they took the Foley out to reduce the chance of infection with having that Foley in. Yeah, and at this point, she said I was a stretchy 3, stretchy 4, but that the hospital would consider me a 2. I was like, great. So I went home, kept trying to labor, And by the way, this whole time I'd been doing chiropractic care every single week. Like, I actually had the x-ray. My chiropractor did an x-ray when I was 3 weeks pregnant, but I had no idea I was 3 weeks pregnant. And so, but then we started the care, and I had to go 3 times a week for 2 weeks, and then 2 times a week for like 10 weeks, and then once a week for the rest of my pregnancy, because I did have a tilted sacrum. And the whole reason I wanted to go to him in the first place was so I could see if there was something physically wrong with me that wouldn't let me pass a child through my pelvis.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really wanted that x-ray. So we got the x-ray, and we found out that I had tilted sacrum with a fishhook tailbone. And my mom showed her chiropractor the x-ray, and he was like, whoa, if a baby tried to pass through that, its face would get disfigured. And so
Whoa.
I was like, whoa.
He actually said that?
Yeah, no, my mom's chiropractor. So
Yeah.
it wasn't my chiropractor,
Right.
but
That
yeah.
is crazy.
Someone said,
Wow.
yeah, right? So I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. And so my chiropractor was like, well, because he kept saying, he didn't ever tell me about the disfigured face thing, but he would say like, well, we probably wouldn't be able to fix it all the way right now because your baby and your uterus is putting pressure on your sacrum, but we can try to get it more in alignment and, help you get your VBAC. And so I would go in every week, and he would not manipulate my body, which is why I loved this chiropractor. He only had, it's called the activator method, where he just had this tiny little machine thing that would pop
like,
each
chook,
individual.
chook,
yeah, exactly.
Right?
So,
just like that.
But he explained it to me at the beginning, because I was like, why do you do it this way, not the traditional way? Because I'd been to like 6 chiropractors, and they all did it the traditional way. And he was like, look at my hands. My hands are huge. Like, if I tried to fix just one vertebrae, it'd move lots of vertebrae. It wouldn't just move the vertebrae that needs to be moved. So that's why I use the activator method, to just move the the individual vertebrae that need to be put back into place. Why mess with the ones that are fine to just get the one back into place? So I loved that. And my this was the most pain-free pregnancy I'd ever had. Like, with my first, I had excruciating hip pain my entire pregnancy. With my second, I'd have some like headaches and stuff, and still hip pain, even though I was doing massage therapy with my second, because I could afford a massage therapist, not a chiropractor. And I'd had a bad experience with a chiropractor who told me to come back way too frequently. So he actually started giving me headaches because I was going too much. And I was like, what the heck? So I stopped trusting chiropractors, with my second pregnancy, because I felt like he was just making me go in for money. So
Which is why a lot of the times they have bad raps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's so frustrating, because then I found this lovely chiropractor who, really cared about me and just wanted to help my body get back into place. And so even though at the beginning, I was a little skeptical, because I was like, oh, he's making me go 3 times a week again, and then 2 times a week. Like, this is so excessive. And then I did start feeling more pain, because he'd say, it gets worse before it gets better, because then you're like moving stuff around that hasn't been moved. And so I was like super skeptical. But then it started. Then I got my structural integrator, which is also called Rolfing. And so she says that you should pair structural integration like within 4 hours before the chiropractic appointment. So then that would help the adjustment stick better, because I felt like every time I'd leave the chiropractor, I'd turn my head in the car while driving, and then everything would just pop out of place. So I started going to structural integrator, and she would release the binding in my fascia, so then it would allow my bones to be more receptive to the adjustment. And then the structural integrator also worked on a ton of like emotional stuff. So their philosophy is like your body is affected by the emotions you feel. And so if you don't release those emotions, or even if you don't release those bad habits, like I was a dancer between the ages of 4 and 8, and then again at 10 and 12. And she said that my body still had the effects of being a dancer, 10 years later. And so because I never had fixed I'd never fixed my fascia, so it was still having the bad habits that they teach you in dance. And so like how you need to like squeeze your glutes to stand straight. And she's like, you can stand straight without squeezing your glutes. That's just an easy way that they like cheat your body into trying to look straight, even though it's causing you more harm than good. So all this stuff. So I started going to structural integrator and my chiropractor, and I felt amazing. It was the best pain-free pregnancy I've ever had. So we were inducing me, and they took the Foley out, and then I got like way off track. Sorry, guys.
You're fine.
Back into labor, So Wednesday, I can't remember. I think this was like Thursday night. She texted me and she's like, "Wait, are you GBS positive?" Because we'd already gone home at this time, and it was like 11 o'clock. And my husband, she actually called, and my husband answered, and because I think I was taking a bath or something, and he was like, "Yeah, she's GBS positive." And my midwife was like, "She needs to come in right now. We need to give her antibiotics, and she needs to get antibiotics every 12 hours." So we had to pack up again and go drop the kids off at someone's house, and then we went to, or actually I think my mom stayed with them that night, and then just Dan and I went to the birthing center. And then we went and this is why I loved my midwife, because she started giving me IV antibiotics, because that was one big reason I didn't want to do a birthing center, because I was like, if I have to go get antibiotics, they're going to put me on an IV, and then I'm going to be stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
So she was like, "No, I can give you an IV." And so I did the IV antibiotics, and after the dose, they were like, "Okay, you can go home, or you can just stay here. What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, we've already got my kids over at someone, we've already got our kids taken care of," because we'd made the plan of, okay, when my mom wakes up with the kids in the morning, she's going to take them over to a friend's house, and then my husband's aunt is going to pick them up, and then they can stay overnight. Anyway, so we had this whole plan. So I was like, I'm just going to stay here, and we're going to just try to rest here, because I could not sleep at my house. I was feeling all the contractions, and I'd wake up, and my husband would just, I'd grab his hand and put it on my sacrum, and then he'd squeeze it, he'd press my sacrum, and then he'd roll over and go back to sleep, and then I'd be like, waiting for the next contraction. And so I was like, we're just going to stay here, and then I can have more support people than just, keep disrupting my husband. And so we stayed there, and Friday, or was it Saturday morning? See, I don't even know what days this was.
So we left your house technically Saturday morning, but we were there Friday night. So it was Friday night when Angie called us in. Yeah.
Okay.
Friday night, and then you were there Saturday morning. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and so, which, by the way, that night, Meagan had come to my house, and we'd, burned all my fears and stuff. That was pretty intense. They had me, write down on each, a piece of paper, strips of paper it was a paper, and then we tore it into strips of all my fears that I had, and I couldn't even visualize. I also started going to hypnotherapists. I went to 2 sessions before I went into labor, because I realized that I had a lot more PTSD than I thought from specifically my first C-section. My second wasn't as bad, but my first C-section, I just had all this trauma and all this shame and guilt and just feeling broken and horrible. So I had all these limiting beliefs. One of my fears was that impossible 7 centimeters. I felt like it would be impossible for my body to hit 7 centimeters. You literally
couldn't even draw a picture of your body getting past that point. It was really, yeah. It was blocking you. Yep.
Yep. And then also I was worried about the placenta, crapping out again and all this stuff. So I had all these fears. So we went and we got our little Dutch oven and we burnt the fears in them.
Yeah, that's my favorite way to
liberating.
To release fears.
Yeah.
I always thought that was like super kooky and hippie and stuff, but
it does amazing things.
Yeah,
it does.
Even if it is hippie, it works. Like,
it's dopamine.
So, yeah, which all of this stuff, like, you know, chiropractic care, hypnotherapy, like all this stuff, I'd always thought, oh, that's way too extreme for me. But then I did it, and I'm like, if it works, it works. And so it was amazing. So we go into the birthing center, which after we burnt my fears, they were like, oh, you should take a bath and then go to bed. We'll all sleep. And then another day of labor the next day. But then Angie, my midwife, was like, well, you have to come in and get an IV. And so then I got the IV, and we all decided to stay at the birthing center. But Meagan went home and slept because I was like, this is going to be super slow. So you just come home and sleep. And so the next morning she came and she brought us all breakfast. It was amazing. And like, Dan got some cereal and I got some oatmeal from Starbucks, and it was great. And so it was nice to just have because I could not sleep that night. It was horrible. And I was in the bathtub, and I was in the bathtub for like 3 hours because they told me it would be fine to be in the bathtub because I was already getting antibiotics every 12 hours. And so I was in that bathtub, and at my head, like, I kept falling asleep, and then my face would hit the water, and I was like, whoa, like, okay, I need to stay awake. I don't want to drown, of all things. But then I was in so much pain, I didn't want to get out of the water because I felt like I could hardly handle it in the water. It would be horrible out of the water, but I kept falling asleep. So I was like, I'm just going to try to get out and sleep. So I like dried off, put on my great grandmother's robe or muumuu or whatever, and then I crawled into bed, and I just felt like so horrible and with no strength. And then, which my husband was already passed out, because we'd had horrible nights of sleep, so it was a queen bed and he was sleeping on the bed, so I just crawled in next to him. And then my midwife came and introduced me to the new midwife, because she had a birth she had to attend in a different city because her partner was on vacation. So it was just her delivering all the babies at 2 birthing centers. So she had to leave, and she called her, I don't know if it's like a friend or what, but this was a home birth midwife who came, and they introduced me to her, and I was like, yeah, whatever, hi, I'm going to try and sleep now. And then she realized how miserable I was. So she asked me if she could do some energy work on me, and I was like, whatever, lady, like, do whatever you want. And then she asked me if she could rub some essential oils on me, and I was like, whatever you think is best, whatever. Like, I literally don't care, I just want to sleep. And so then she started, like, rubbing me and doing all, like, putting essential oils on my back and on my neck, and then I just passed out, and I didn't wake up till the next morning. And I was like, who was that angel who came and just put me to sleep? Well, my first thought was, wow, I smell like essential oils. Where did this come from? And then I remembered, she asked me before she put essential oils on me. I remember it was this lady. And then the next day, and she was still there. Like, I turned around and she was still sitting there right behind me. She's like, good morning, how did you feel? And I was like, wow, I slept. Like,
Yep.
You are an angel. Like, she literally, I felt like she was just this angel that had fallen out of heaven. And so we worked a lot on, she would like stick her fingers in and try to open up my cervix manually. And she was like inside of me for 48 minutes. Like, it was intense. And I was just really tight everywhere. And she's like, why are you so tight? Are you anxious, nervous? And I was like, yeah, all these OBs don't believe in me. And in my hypnotherapy session, I'd even said, like, I just want one male to tell me that I can do it, because all the OBs, like every male person in my life pretty much thinks that I shouldn't do this, and even my husband. And she was like, why do you need a male validation? Like, and I was like, I don't know. It feels like because women and men should work together, and so if a man is saying it's okay, then that means I'm in partnership with them. I don't know. And so we talked about all that, broke down all my fears and blah, blah, blah. And then, but I wasn't progressing. Like, I would go on walks. Julie came, we did walks, we did abdominal lifts. We were trying to get her in a good position. And Meagan came, and we went on a walk again, and we did curb walks, and we did, all this stuff. And I was like stuck at 3 centimeters. And so everyone said, like, well, let's go to sleep. Contractions should pick up at night. And if they don't, we can talk about our other options. And that's when Meagan started bringing up, like, hey, this other hospital does do Pitocin for VBACs after 2. So if we did want to transfer to the hospital, we should go to this one. And so we were like, okay, whatever. And so the midwife started looking into it, and I just went to sleep. And then they all woke me up at, I think, like 3 a.m. and were like, hey, honey, your contractions haven't picked up. Like, you're still asleep and you haven't been having contractions. So we need to talk about going to the hospital and to try to get things going. And she said, because she was, she's this home birth midwife, so I felt like she was the hippiest of the hippiest, and she'd been doing Reiki and essential oils and stuff. And she was the one telling me, hey, I think you just need an epidural and you just need Pitocin. Like, you just need your contractions to be strong. And so...
And you needed rest.
Okay.
You had been working so hard for such a long time. You needed rest before your body could work hard again.
Well, and I think, too, you had such power over your body that an epidural would allow you to relax and let your body do its thing and take over. So, yeah.
Because that was one thing so one thing we kept repeating over and over is pain with progress, pain with progress. So then, which everyone kept telling me my whole pregnancy, you need to let go, you need to let go. And I'm like, how the crap do you let go? Like, what does that even mean? And so, and I'd done all these, guided meditations and stuff to learn how to let go. So I thought I could do it. I was like, I got this. And then they started telling me pain with progress, pain with progress. So every time I'd have a contraction, I was like, you better be dilating cervix, like, keep progressing. And so, yeah, it was really it was really hard. I thought I was better than I was, which I probably was, but I still wasn't letting go. And so everyone was like, does she like to control, like, does she like to be in control and all this stuff? Asking my husband, and he was like, yes, definitely. She definitely likes being in control. So I think they all understood that it was really hard to just let go of control. And so she just thought that I needed the epidural and Pitocin. And so we went to the hospital, and it was, I had lots of contractions in the car, and then we get to the hospital, and there's my little posse of like 5 people, because my midwife is with me, my doula is with me, my husband,
you had a crew,
and my mother. Yeah. And so we all just come in here, and we're like, she's in labor, VBAC after 2, like, we need Pitocin, please. And so they said, sure, yeah, we can definitely do that. And everyone was they were so amazing. Like, it was hands down my best hospital experience, because all the nurses were just so genuine and so sweet. And I go in, and I was like, I really want to shower. I haven't showered in forever. My hair looks terrible. And if I'm going to deliver, I have a birth photographer coming. Like, I need to have it. And so I was like, before the epidural, can I just please shower? And the nurse was like, oh, yeah, like, that's totally fine.
Oh, so good. I love that.
Yeah, everyone was so sweet and just willing to just work with us. And so I went in, I showered, and then afterwards, the anesthesiologist came in, and he was really sweet. So my biggest fear with a C-section was that I was going to die from the spinal tap, like, because that is my worst part of a C-section, is getting that spinal tap. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying not to have a C-section so I don't get a spinal tap, and now here I am trying to get an epidural. Like, it was like my worst nightmare. And every time they'd stick me with an IV, it was like this whole big thing where they'd have to hold me so I wouldn't punch someone, and then so they could give me the antibiotics. And so it was just horrible. And so with this epidural, the anesthesiologist was like, hey, you need to be still and you cannot move, or else that is going to increase your risk of getting a spinal leak. It's going to increase your risk of getting spinal headaches. Like, you need to not move. And I was like, shoot, I need to not, because that was my problem. I'd always like jerk out of the way because I can feel it going in, even if they numb me. Like, it's just horrible. So my husband laid down, and I just grabbed his head, and I just squeezed it as hard as I could, curled up in a ball. And I was focused on squeezing his head, like, all his guts out. And so then he was able to give me the epidural, and he was like, sweet, you did great, you didn't move, it should be perfect. So they taped me up. And also, my mom had a bad experience with an epidural. I'd never had an epidural before, so I was kind of terrified. But I knew that I figured I wouldn't react poorly to them because I had Percocet with my C-sections, and I'd been great. And so I learned that epidurals have opioids in them, and I was like, okay, my body can handle opioids, I should be fine. So they gave me the epidural, and then they gave me Pitocin, and they started it at 2, which I told them, like, I only want half a unit or 1 unit. And the nurses and the OBs were like, at that point, it's naturopathic. Like, it's not going to do anything. If we're going to do this, we need to hit it, and we need to hit it hard. And we need to get your uterus to actually respond. And so I was like, okay, whatever. And everyone was like, you need to let go and you need to trust. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to let go, and I'm just going to trust these providers. So they gave me 2 milliliters or whatever that unit is of Pitocin, and then they increased it to every 30 to 60 minutes, and they only maxed it out at 10. So awesome. That made me feel better. It's like, okay, there is a maximum, and it's lower than usual. So they maxed it at 10, and we switched providers, which the original provider, she had told me, like, okay, we just need to be realistic. You have a less than 50% chance of success with the VBAC, but we'll, give it a try. And I was like, okay, thank you. I don't know that already. And so then this new OB came at 7 a.m, and she seemed a little more doubtful. She's just like, whatever, we're just gonna let this woman labor. And so she checked me, and I was at 3 centimeters or 4 centimeters. And then a few hours later, she checked me, and she's like, let's see if this lady's progressed. And she came out, she's like, oh, she's 6 centimeters. And everyone just in the room explodes.
It was loud.
So happy. Yeah, we were like screaming because I'd never hit 6 centimeters before. 4 centimeters had been my max with my first, and then with my second, I'd only gone to 1 centimeter. So 6 centimeters, everyone was super happy. And then my midwife gave the most beautiful prayer, leaving everyone in tears. And she was just so grateful that we'd gotten this far. So everyone just starts calming down. Everyone's like, okay, we got to sleep. We're going to get ready for labor. So everyone's got to sleep. We're going to get food. So my husband and my mom went to the cafeteria to get food. And I was just laying, which, oh my gosh, my team had been rebozoing me this entire time. Like, they were shaking my
Meagan's
apples.
secret weapon.
I know.
Shake them apples.
So I had, when my epidural was at a 10, I slept great, but then I woke up and I couldn't move my legs. And I hated that, and I really wanted to move my legs, so they turned it, the anesthesiologist was awesome. He just came in, he's like, great, we'll put it down at 7. So he put it down at 7. And then I was able to move my legs. I went and I laid on the back of the bed, on my knees. So I was on my knees, leaning on the back of the bed, which I couldn't move my legs like too much. Like people had to move them for me kind of, but I could move, which is what I wanted. And so I was leaning on the back of the bed while my doula and midwife and mom and husband switched off apples, shaking my apples, and then I laid down, and then they would rebozo me because I was like laying on the rebozo, and then they'd pull me forward, like gently shaking me, kind of like gently just pulling me forwards and back, and then my contractions would couple until they would start rebozoing me, and then they would be consistent and steady.
Dan and I were like, every single time we stopped, Dan would be like, oh, and I'd be like, yep, there they are again. I'm like, I will literally rebozo until this, I will just rebozo you during pushing. Not really, but I was like, we will do it until this stops. Yeah.
I know. And like, I was like, you guys are birthing this baby with me. Like, we birthed this baby.
That is so awesome.
By myself.
It was awesome.
Yeah, so they would rebozo me when I coupled, and then finally they were like pretty regular. So then we just did the extended Sims or whatever. So I would get the peanut ball. Yeah, exaggerated. Yeah. And so they got the peanut ball, put it under my right leg, with my left leg extended, and I was like on my chest, flat on my chest pretty much with my right leg on the peanut ball, and my contractions were great. And so 2 hours after that OB said that I was 6 centimeters, I felt little tiny fingers like in my vagina. It felt like little fingers in my vagina, and I was like, whoa, that's weird. But then I was like, oh, I'm just going to ignore it. And then I felt it again. I felt little tiny fingers in my vagina. And I was like, Roxana, midwife, please, can you get some gloves on or something? You have to check me. I think my baby's coming out. Or there's something in my vagina and you have to check it. And I really wanted to stick my fingers inside myself and feel it. But I was like, my waters are ruptured. I'm not sanitized. I don't want to introduce anything. So then the midwife, she was like, well, we're at the hospital. I can't check you anymore. Let's call the nurse. So that we call the nurse in, she puts the glove on, she checks me, and she's like, oh my gosh, you're complete, and your baby's coming out. And I just like burst into tears. Like I was bawling. I couldn't believe or fathom that my body had made it.
And Dan and your mom had just left. So we were like calling them, like, come back.
Yep. They left to get food, and he said that right when you called, they had like just paid.
Yeah.
So they had their food and everything, and then Meagan called, and he was like, oh my gosh, she's pushing, we have to go. So they like sprinted down the hospital and back into the room. And then everyone's like, no, like she's not pushing right now. Like,
she's just ready to push. Yeah, Dad was like, she's going to push.
So they gave me hand sanitizer, and so I started, like, I was able to feel her head. They're like, that little baseball's your baby. And I was like, oh my gosh. I still couldn't imagine her coming out because I was like, she is surrounded by bone, and she just feels like a quarter. Like, she feels like the size of a quarter. Like, how is she able to get through my bones? But they were like, oh, it'll happen. Like, yeah, you just push her out. And so then the OB started coming, and the OB had a resident with her, and they all got suited up. And then I wanted to push squatting, but they told me that they wouldn't be able to assist as much. And since I had an epidural,
she was kind of a stickler on that too. She's like, nope, I cannot allow that. I was like, yes, you can. Choosing not to.
But they were like, well, we can't assist you as much, but you can be lying on the, like, I was sitting on the bed, and then Meagan and my husband were holding my legs. So I was like, it's called like an upright squat or something.
Yeah.
And so they were holding my legs, and then they were a lot more involved than I thought they would be. The resident was like, had this bowl of oil, and she was like scooping this oil and like shoving it in my vagina and just like massaging everything and stretching it out. And they told me to do some practice pushes, and so I did some practice pushes, and then they were like, wow, you're doing great, your baby's coming out. And I was like, if she's coming out, how are these practice pushes? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
But then they told me the OB was all ready, and they were like, okay, you can start pushing now. And so started pushing, and they were telling me they were counting because I couldn't feel anything. Like apparently some people feel the urge to push, but I did not have, like with an epidural, and I did not have that. And so every time I'd have a contraction, they were like, okay, push, and then they'd count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which it was a long time. I was like, oh my goodness, I need to bear down for that long. But so I was pushing when they told me to push, and then all of a sudden it was like they threw all caution to the wind, and they were like, push, you need to push right now, you need to get this baby out. I was so confused. I was like, why are you telling me to push? Every time I'd look at the monitor behind me, her heartbeat was it was at like 150, and I was like, why are they freaking out? They need to calm down. I'm gonna tear. Like, why are they telling me to shove her out? But then finally my midwife, Roxana, she was like, honey, just listen to them. You need to get this baby out. You need to push. And I was like, okay, if my midwife is telling me this, not just the OB is being ridiculous, so I'm gonna push this dang baby out, and so fast. And so I just went and I pushed. And so I only had like 18 minutes of pushing, and then she came out, and she was, I don't know if she was blue, but she was purple, and she wasn't crying. So they just they said later they just used me as a table. Like they just put my baby on my belly, and I was like rubbing her and like, smacking her and like, come on, Harper, you need to cry, like you need to just breathe, like, and so that one was a little nerve-wracking, but I knew she was fine. I was just like, come on, you need to cry. And so then, and they'd like called the NICU team or something over, and so, because later my husband told me that he saw her heart rate drop down to the 20s, and I was like, whoa, well, why didn't they tell me? And he was like, well, they didn't want you to be freaking out, so they were just telling you to push. Yeah, so I did tear in 3 places, which I had no idea that labias there, but I tore both of them, and then I also tore, in the back, and so they only had to stitch 2 of the tears, but I was a little frustrated, but I was just, oh my gosh, I was on cloud 9. I was the happiest person that has ever existed, because I couldn't believe that I had pushed my baby out of my vagina, and I never felt like, oh, I'm gonna do this to prove all those OBs wrong, but when she came out, I was like, suck it, OBs. Like, why were you telling me I couldn't do this? I had to work so hard for this stupid thing because you didn't believe in me. And so it was just so empowering and so awesome. And I never wanted to say that, like, oh, a birth healed me, because I think you should heal from a birth without another birth. But holy crap, it is cleansing to have a baby come out of you. And it is just awesome. And that is when I realized, wow, this is why so many midwives and so many women push to have women get as much chance as they can to deliver vaginally, and why women who get C-sections shouldn't just roll over and assume they need a C-section next time. Like, you can always try for vaginal delivery. And it was the recovery, that is a joke. I was like, vaginal delivery? You don't need a recovery. Like, yeah, there's stitches in my vagina, but they're down there. Like, I can hardly feel them. And so this is nothing compared to something in my abdomen where I can't even move without feeling pain and being reminded of it. And so now I know that, there's definitely other women who have way harder vaginal recoveries, but my midwife had told me before, like, for the first 3 days, you need to just sit on that bed and breastfeed your baby. You do not get up unless you need to go to the bathroom and stuff. And so I really just, listened to, even though I was like, what? Even with the C-section, you have to get up and walk. Like, that's so weird. She was like, yeah, just like walk to the bathroom, but that's it. And so I really focused on healing and just listening to what everyone was saying and, allowing my body to heal. Because she did say if you have those 3 days of doing nothing, then your chances of postpartum depression greatly go down and your healing goes so much faster and smoother. So I was like, okay, if she says that works, then that works. And so, but I was like 3 days and a week, and then like now I'm 3 weeks postpartum, and I feel amazing, like better than months after my C-sections. So anyways, I definitely think everything was worth it, even though we spent like as much as we would have on a C-section with all the chiropractors and structural integrators and hypnotherapists. It was like thousands of dollars going into this, but it wasn't, like, I'm healthier, like My baby came out great. Like, it was absolutely, every effort was worth it. And, 5 days of labor, some people would say, oh, I'd just go for the C-section. And I'm like, no, 5 days of labor is nothing compared to months of recovery after a major abdominal surgery. So it was so gorgeous and beautiful. And I just felt so connected because, all my life I kind of felt disconnected from women. Like, I felt like, I don't know, it was just weird. And like, even when I first met Meagan, she was like, so like, she'd curl her hair and she'd look so pretty and like so peppy. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I jive well with that vibe. But then, I'd prayed about it and it was like, you need her, like you need Meagan. And I was like, okay, I'll trust
everyone
it.
needs a Meagan.
I felt like, I know, and I felt the connection like through messaging. And I was like, okay, I knew she was right before I met her, and I met her and she's really nice. So I'm just gonna, I'll just trust my instinct or whatever. And then she was the exact thing that we needed. And it's like, you kind of have to, as a doula, you have to go in with makeup and stuff, because if you're there for 3 days, you
come out the other side looking pretty gnarly.
Yeah. A little tired.
Like, when I'd met her, she'd just gone through or not when I met you, one of the prenatal visits, you'd like been with a mom like all night, and you're like, yeah, I got home at 4 a.m, and I was like, oh my god. And so it's just, doulas have to go through a lot. And and my husband, because at first he hated the idea of a doula. He thought doula would replace him, because he's super involved with my labors, and he didn't like the idea of a doula coming in and taking his place. And he just didn't think she would do much. She'd just be a waste of money. And now
she earned it.
I would hope he would consider me as his friend now.
Definitely. And he's like, every person should have a doula, especially first-time moms, because if we had a doula, then we wouldn't have had a C-section. And so now he's like the biggest advocate for doulas. He just loves them so much. So anyways, doulas are awesome, worth every penny. And also he questioned the birth photographer, but I got a birth photographer to have pictures on my blog, and I was like, this is happening. But now he really enjoys the pictures, even though we haven't gotten all the pictures yet. It's like, come on. But she's still editing them, but she was awesome. So anyways, all this stuff is worth it. And the VBAC link is awesome. And get a doula, get a midwife, everything. Yep.
Get everything.
Yeah. And I love, I just saw him. I saw him change over these months, and it was really fun. It was really fun to see him, and he was just an amazing support person. And 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 doulas, obviously, like, we're advocates for doulas. We are doulas, but we have personally had doulas change our birth experiences too. And we have a blog all about it. We talk about doulas and the benefits of them, and we have a special episode number 5 from our husbands, and then we have another special episode, I think it's 7, with birth partners talking about it as well. So birth doulas are amazing. They actually save money a lot of the time because they do avoid cesareans. Doulas help births go a little quicker. They're usually educated in their area, and so they do kind of know the hospitals or the birth centers and the midwives and what those certain places offer and what they don't offer. They're aware of other things and have other ideas that maybe other support people don't. And overall, doulas improve the birth outcomes and satisfaction. Yep. Satisfaction. I don't know what I was saying.
Say it again,
I was
Meagan.
saying satisfaction is what I was saying.
Yes, you were.
Yeah, satisfaction. That's what I'm saying. During their birth experience. So we highly encourage you to check out our blog, the VBAClink.com/blog. We have a myth-busting blog all about it. And Kimberly, we were so grateful for you, and I was so honored to be a part of your experience. I actually was just with your photographer yesterday. We were talking all about it, and she said that she just was blown away and couldn't believe everything that happened and was so grateful to be a part of it as well. So thank you for sharing your story, and we know that you're going to inspire so many out there, and we're excited. And you have a podcast too that's potentially coming out here. Go to, is your Instagram The Barefoot Mama?
It's Barefoot Mama blog.
Barefoot Mama blog. So go to her Instagram and find out if her podcast and her blog, read her blog. Her words are inspiring. Her education is incredible. This girl knows her stuff. So check her out.
And it's barefoot like BEAR.
Yes.
B-E-A-R,
like bear. Like a bear.
Oh, like a bear.
Yeah.
Like bear paw.
Barefoot.
Because my last name is Barfus, and Barfus is Swiss German for bear's paw or barefoot. So.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome.
BEAR, foot.
Foot.
Mama, MAMA.
Yep.
Blog.
On Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram and Facebook it's Barefoot Mama blog, but then my blog is barefootmama.com.
Yeah.
It's just Barefoot Mama was taken on Instagram and Facebook.
Rude.
So she's Barefoot Mama. So go check her out. She's inspiring and has awesome tips as well. So
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to be a guest on the podcast? Head over to thevbaclink.com/share and submit your story. For more information on all things VBAC, including online and in-person VBAC classes, the VBAC blog, and Julie and Meagan's bios, head over to thevbaclink.com. Congratulations on starting your journey of learning and discovery with the VBAC Link.